All right. Hello. Hello. Welcome, everybody. All the breadcrumbers out there. Welcome to Follow the Breadcrumbs Show. It's been a while. My name is Lauren Lance, founder and CEO of Breadcrumbs. Of course, the whole company of Breadcrumbs, it started many years ago when I got scammed on ICO and I couldn't get access to these investigation and monitoring tools for crypto. So we built them ourselves. And since then, we've just been iterating and building these products. And what we care most about is making these tools accessible to everybody. So access means four things. It means not having to ask permission to use the tools. It means the tools themselves are very easy to use. It also means the price points are very affordable. And fourth is you don't have to be a registered business to use them. And by making these tools accessible for everybody, our thesis is that it will make crypto a safer place because everyone in the industry has the ability to protect themselves and the community around them. So that's Breadcrumbs, and that's what we stand for. And welcome. This is our first show of the year. And we have a great show ahead for you guys. I like to call it the 4 Cs. So it's the changing crypto compliance, and then the fourth C is everyone's Canadian. So kind of neat. And so before we get into introducing everybody, I'll just give you a few updates of some of the cool things that have come in to Breadcrumbs since we did our last show. So I'll just share my screen here. And yeah, one of the new features that we added, this is a highly requested feature, is with our monitoring tools, before, if you want to set an alert, let's say you want to set an alert for like an address and, let's alert me when more than 1 ETH gets sent. But now, especially if you're working in compliance, maybe you care about only transactions that are more than $10,000 as opposed to 1 ETH or 10 ETH. So a feature we added is you can now set a volume condition based on the US dollar amount. And so now with this monitoring dashboard, I'll actually get an alert when more than, when more than $10,000 has been sent. So cool little feature. It really helps with especially people in compliance, where you can just quickly set up monitoring dashboards if you want to monitor any sort of address or entity or anything like that. One of the other big features that came out this past month is we updated our the way you can sign up for Breadcrumbs. Before, we didn't have any trials. If you want to get access to our premium features like the Pathfinder or the filter by date, some of our premium functionality, you just had to pay right away. But now, because these tools are so great, we are happy to just give you guys the opportunity to just try it. So all of our plans now include free trials. The basic plan, 7 days free. And our compliance plans, they all come with 14 days free. So if you're unsure, you can always come and try the products risk-free and see for yourself if they're a good fit for you. And our team here is happy to guide you through and show you how these tools can help out, for due diligence, for compliance, for investigations. Many use cases, and they're quite powerful, but most importantly, they're all accessible. And so with that, I'd love to introduce some people who are accessible right now, and thank you for sharing your time. I'd like to introduce the panel. We've got Amber, Joseph, and Wayne here. Let me stop sharing. Yeah. And maybe if we just kind of go around, and I'd love to hear, quick 1 minute if you guys could introduce yourselves, and we'll start with Amber.
Sure. Hi, I'm Amber Scott. I'm the founder and CEO at Outlier Compliance Group. We essentially try to keep companies out of trouble. We work primarily in the anti-money laundering, privacy, and regulatory space in Canada. And we've been accepting payments in Bitcoin since 2013. We actually recently started working with Yucapay to accept a broader array of crypto payments as well. And hockey team wise, I have always cheered for the Montreal Canadiens. So
All right.
I'm a strange Torontonian.
So throwing in some of that Canadian content. I love it. Thank you, Amber, for sharing that. All right. So we'll move on to Joseph. Love to hear can you introduce yourself and which team is your favorite?
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks for having me. Thanks, esteemed guests, Amber and Wayne. Pleasure to be on the same panel with you. My name is Joseph Iuso. I'm the Chief Anti-Money Laundering Officer at BitBuy. And I don't know, I've been in crypto on and off for a long time now, doing all kinds of weird things and also a consultant in other roles. My favorite team, I don't really have one. I just watch sports once in a while, but I would have to give my hat to the Toronto Maple Leafs because I'm close to Toronto and that's what most people root for. And that's it.
Great. Thanks, Joseph. And Wayne, last but not least, love to hear, you got the nice breadcrumbs blue going on for your Yucapay logo as well. Love to hear your intro and your team.
Thanks, Lauren. Well, great to be here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Yucapay. We help businesses accept crypto and get paid in dollars with zero volatility, no trading, and no wallets required. For online payments, we provide invoicing, checkouts, and payment links. And we also have in-person payments with a POS terminal for iOS and Android. We're also the payment processor for the largest crypto conference in Canada called the Futures Conference. And we're also partnered with one of the largest payment acquirers in the country. And for the Canadian flavor, I got to side with Joseph. I'm also a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. I've been following them ever since I was young. And I've been a hardcore Leafs fan since the beginning. So
Awesome.
We'll pass it over to Lauren.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Yeah, well, hey, I mean, the only good thing about the Leafs is the blue. They share a similar color with breadcrumbs. So I forgot to mention I'm originally from Winnipeg. You can see in the background here I got my my Winnipeg Jets jersey. So I'm a very proud Winnipegger, and hopefully the Jets do well this year. But yeah, let's get into this. The 4 C's: crypto compliance, changing, which has changed quite a lot this past year, and so much has gone on in this past year. I'd love to hear from you guys, how, from your point of view, like, how have you seen the crypto compliance world change? If we can start off with Amber.
Sure. I think one of the things that we do fairly often with our clients is that we'll sit regulatory examinations with them. And so if they have an exam with FINTRAC, the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Center of Canada, which is our anti-money laundering regulator, we've heard them ask more often, what technology are you using? How are you tracing transactions? How are you monitoring transactions? And they're looking for this to be reflected in risk assessments. They're looking for us particularly for virtual asset service providers, so companies that are brokerages or exchanges, to have this type of technology in place, to be using it to assess the risk associated with their clients and their transactions. And they're looking for that to be something that's increasingly sophisticated. I think that there was a point early on where it was pretty common for folks in our industry to say that, the regulators don't get it and they don't understand what we're doing. They don't understand what we're seeing. And I would say that time is well behind us. When you have someone in that's examining you, you can expect them to have an in-depth understanding of those business models. We still need to educate, of course. We always do in cutting-edge technology spaces, but I think there's a much more in-depth understanding and a much more high-level expectation of what it is that we actually need to do to manage our risk.
Great. And the other thing is, just over the past year, like, so much has happened as well around the war in Ukraine, the the inflation, the FTX, all these sanctions happening. What have you seen from your ends around that as well?
So I think from the FTX perspective, my lesson on that is more non-technical than anything else, just in that I don't think we can sleep on risk. Just because another company or another person has proclaimed, even in the public eye, that they think a company is good risk, that doesn't mean that we can accept that as face value. We always need to do our due diligence, whether or not someone is on the cover of Forbes. And frankly, I don't think FTX, that it was very much a human failure, as opposed to a technology failure. And I think it's really important to preface that when we look at that type of thing. There's always going to be bad actors. There's always going to be people that are dishonest, and technology can be used to help us hide those things, and it can be used to help us find those things. But the failure in that situation is ultimately a human failure. In terms of sanctions, that's been constantly evolving and changing, and it's been a huge burden for financial entities just to keep up to speed with everything that's happening, to make sure that they're protecting their institutions from that risk.
Right. Yeah, I imagine so, especially well, I mean, most crypto addresses that ever get sanctioned really just come out of OFAC, the US regulator. But the first time we actually saw sanctions coming out of Canada was or sanctions crypto addresses was with the trucker rally a year ago. Do you remember that whole time and episode, or things that you can maybe not necessarily share from that episode, but what has been the impact from that, has come out, changes that have happened, stuff like that?
Is this for me? Did one of you guys want to address that?
Yeah, actually we should also I'd love to hear. Well, feel free to just jump in, guys, if I'd love to hear your thoughts too from Joseph and Wayne. How has the changing landscape over the year affected you guys as well?
The trucker thing was definitely an interesting situation, especially when the banks got certain information and the crypto companies got other information, and the way the channels and the information was circulated was very back channelish. And the websites themselves, they weren't really right up to date, and so you had to sort of guess what was going on and try and communicate with others in the industry. And it was funny. I won't mention which bank, but they wanted the crypto list and I wanted the names, so we exchanged. And then we did our own searches and back channeled it with other people. But I think now it's a little bit more formal, I would hope, but I haven't seen anything new. And it's changed the landscape for sure. We got new regulations out of it related to payment service providers, or at least providers of payment services. You gotta be very careful, because there's two different definitions. But it was providers of payment services that were, and the funny part was the second part of this statement, which is invoice payments and payments for goods and services, didn't materialize until July. So the regs were published April 27th, backdated to April 5th. They bypassed Gazette 1. And then all the way up until July, they finally came out with, okay, these are the two types of payment services. And by the way, crowdfunding is included too. And then proceeded to go through and trying to get more clarity on the regulations, and I don't think we're even 100% there yet. I'm still waiting on a few items and clarity as to what are the obligations, because the challenge with adding those regulations in after the fact was there's not enough clear guidance as to who's responsible for what within the chain. So some people are handling the money, some aren't. Some are handling the messaging, some aren't. Some are exempt because they're using the EFTs to pull the money. Some aren't because they're pushing. So it's sort of like there's a lot of still question marks, and I think we're going to be going through that at least for another at least 6 to 12 months. I don't blame FinTrack. I think it's just the nature of what happened with the truckers and putting things in right away. And I'm going to leave it at that for now.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like anytime like one big event happens, it's just there's so many different stakeholders along the chain that need to be updated, informed. You know, I'm sure there's a lot of broken telephone. It really is like a logistical communication challenge.
Yeah.
More the situation than anything.
And maybe just to add to that too, Lauren, is to Joseph's point on the provider of payment services. As a provider of payment services, that was something that at UkaPay we had to face head on amidst all the changes that happened in the last year. And following all the new guidelines, the new rules and regulations has been at the forefront of our business. And we've had to adapt, we've had to pivot, but also provide some input to the regulators as well. So it's definitely impacted our business, and we've been at the forefront of that as well.
If I can just shamelessly plug for a couple of things in that regard.
I'd love to hear.
When we have big sea changes like that, and we've had more anti-money laundering changes that have been announced in the Canadian budget that just passed as coming up. I think we're going to see more changes just for the foreseeable future. When we think about how long will this be a work in progress, I think the answer is forever. In the same way that technology is constantly evolving, regulation is constantly evolving. And there's some pretty fantastic groups that exist, including the Canadian Money Service Business Association and the Canadian Blockchain Consortium, that are there to help bring industry players together and comment on these regulatory changes. So I can't stress enough that if you're reading these things, if you're not understanding them, if you're having problems with them, don't just post comments on Reddit. Look for those forums to be able to participate.
And can you just say those forum names again? So everybody.
Yeah, the Canadian Money Service Business Association, so the CMSBA, and the Canadian Blockchain Consortium are two of my favorites.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. Were there other events? You know, it's been quite a lot has happened this past year. Other events that have also, you know, had a big impact on changing your processes, whether it's from consulting or from performing your compliance programs?
I mean, and from a compliance program, there's been a lot of changes on the other side of things with securities too, and trying to push through. I guess the CSA is trying to push through the fact that everybody has to pre-register or get registered, and we're still living with that. Some of them are, and some of them aren't scenarios. And we're still waiting for the hammer to drop on those that aren't registered, that should be registered, and others that are technically MSBs only that should be complying with the regs but aren't. So they're sort of muddying the waters with regard to that piece of it. But yeah, on the security side, we're still messing with a lot of trying to figure out and sort out and create a level playing field. So the ones that are regulated, that have registered, that are doing the right things from a regulated perspective on the security side. And then there's others that are still bypassing it all and getting away with it. And we're just, it's a scratching your head moment. So we're hoping that'll get sorted out soon. But we're still in the conundrums of the bowels of trying to figure out where all the lights are and turning them on.
I see. Was there like for Canada, I'm just not as familiar with it. Was there like regulations, like did the Canadian government, FinTrack come out with, you know, by this date, everyone has to follow these set of rules?
I'll let Amber speak to that one.
Yeah. I mean, for AML, yes. So for AML, that came out in 2019 in its final form, with enforced dates in 2020 and 2021. So everyone that's a money services business, an MSB, which includes all of the dealers in virtual currency, really, had to be registered with FinTrack by that date. In the budget, there was actually a proposal for people that are businesses, they're performing MSB activity that aren't registered as MSB activity, for that to become a criminal charge in some instances, which is it's a pretty big deal. But we do have enterprises that are criminal enterprises that are doing these things for criminal purposes and moving criminal money. And that's the intent in terms of targeting. But it does make it a lot more severe. So that's one of the amendments that we can expect in the relatively near term in terms of the criminal code. And then Joseph was referring to the Canadian Securities Administrators, and that's provincial, so it's not federal. But there were some differences. Ontario had come out a couple of years ago and said everyone who is centered in Ontario must kind of have their first pre-registration pieces done by a certain date. Not all of the provinces took the same approach. And in certain cases, I think Ontario expected certain businesses to be head officed in Ontario and to be doing the process through the OSC, which is the Ontario Securities Commission. And that wasn't the case. And they said, but we're actually in Alberta and we're actually somewhere else that didn't require the same time frame. And the most recent guidance was very across the board. So it kind of removes that as a possibility, where all of the Canadian securities regulators had said across the board, we expect a pre-registration undertaking by a specific date. And we're going to start to call out people, by people, I mean businesses again, that haven't done that thing. So I think time's up on that one. If I was part of an organization that hadn't done that undertaking, I would be very nervous at this point in time.
Right.
And I think we are going to start seeing more of those organizations get called out and named and shamed publicly. And we're seeing big organizations. So Kraken, I think, posted an announcement this morning that said that they had completed their pre-registration undertaking. So that I think is hopeful as well. We're seeing even very large organizations that want to be in Canada taking these steps.
That's great. I guess for Wayne, I'd love to hear from you. Like, your company it's fairly, you're a startup. You had to go out and start doing some registration, or how was that process like for you?
Yeah, so just commenting on the change in the compliance regime, it's great when you have great partners helping with that. And, we've got people like Amber in the space that have been at the forefront of this and helping us understand it and navigating it. So from AML, KYC, KYB perspective, the latest policies, the latest procedures, and reflecting the standards so that we keep up to date with the government changes. On the business front, we help over 100 businesses accept crypto payments, and that ranges in terms of all the different business verticals, from charities for donations, from investments, taking funds for investments, businesses and enterprises. And over the last little while, we've gotten more inquiries about things like know your donor and what information is around that, or know your consumer, know your investor information. And even from the business side, questions about transaction monitoring and fraud prevention that has been increasingly coming up from the users. And I think the context of the discussion is great because there's been enhanced attention towards crypto and the players that are in the space and the things that we need to do to be compliant, to be regulated. And we're doing the right thing to make sure that we have strong, stable institutions and can continue to service the industry.
Great. Yeah, that's interesting to hear, because with PitBuy, you guys are a much larger organization, so you have a lot more resources and, to execute on your compliance programs. But with UCAPay, you guys are a bit smaller, so with less resources, still also being able to go ahead and act compliantly. That's great.
Yeah, well, and obviously, when you're dealing with limited resources, one of the philosophies that we have at UCAPay is that we're looking for asymmetric gains, and in terms of transaction monitoring, fraud prevention, there's obvious tools out there like Breadcrumbs that gives us that advantage.
Yeah. Great. So yeah, that's quite interesting. Lots happened over the past year. Compliance world has changed a lot. From your your experience, what are some of the common crypto crimes that you see or look out for in your compliance programs? What are some of the common things that you guys encounter? Anyone who feels
Do you want me to start? I've got a laundry list.
Yeah.
Uh,
Dirty laundry list. Yeah.
My goodness, fake NFT scams, money mule scams, money mules, MSBs that are not registered or unlicensed MSBs that are registered that have a terrible program and are doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing, MSBs that or other crypto exchanges that don't even do any OSINT and trying to find out who their clients are. They're just blindly letting things go. Romance scams, sextortion scams. What else? Terrorist financing. We've seen some of those high-risk jurisdictions. People trying to evade the Russian sanctions. I don't understand how people here in Canada, especially Canadians, can support something so atrocious, which is what's happening in the Ukraine, where people are sending to the pro-Russian side of things. And I'm not going to condemn them or judge them for it, but it's a shame to be supporting something that is so atrocious with the Ukrainians. And then the Canadian government, I don't know if they've been so focused. I do see stuff coming from the U.S. with regard to that. And then there's pig butchering. We see a lot of that happening as well, where people are just losing their money left, right, and center.
Can you explain what that one is, Joseph? I know we use that term on the compliance side of things, but I feel like we probably have some folks that have tuned in today that aren't familiar with the term, and it's a little jarring.
It is.
Yeah,
I mean, I guess from a perspective of think about fattening the pig, right? So what they're doing is they're slowly getting these people to trust them, to feel encouraged to send more money or for either romance or investment or some other medical expenses or whatever. I'm a doctor and I'm in jail and I'm with Doctors for Humanity or something silly like that. And they've frozen all my money, or they even use terms like that are in compliance, like Mariva injunctions and all these other things. And it's like, oh my God, like the amount of things that they convince these people to do, but they're slowly getting them to up the ante, and then once they get them, they're just like literally devastating them. They've taken all their money, line of credit, you name it, and that's the butchering part, right? So they're slowly fattening them up by making them feel comfortable or guilty or whatever, and then at the end of the day, just going in for the kill, right? So I don't know. Did I do a good job of explaining it, Amber? Maybe a little too much.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. It's like I said, I think it's a jarring term, but it's really important to understand from a compliance perspective how much that's happening and how much people are building these relationships.
And they go on for a long time. We've seen things months, if not almost a year, and it's like you could see them slowly, and you're questioning the travel rule information that they provide. You question what they're saying, and they're these criminals, these scammers, these people. Some of them are not even doing it for material benefit. They're just doing it to save their life. right? So on the other side of this thing, part of them are sweatshops that these people they've come to think that they're making money, and they go to these places that are in Cambodia or Taiwan or Thailand or whatever, and they're being put into like places like prisons. Their phones are taken away, their passports are taken away. It's like they're put away, and they're like, okay, you now have to earn your keep to get out of this thing, right? So it's not only the people that are being ripped off, but the other side of it is the organized crime has done a really good job of figuring out all the different types of ways to get people to come thinking they're going for opportunities, but in reality they're becoming slaves. I was actually talking to somebody, one of my underlings today, about there's somewhere between 40 and 60 million slaves still in the world, and we have the most number of slaves, and a lot of them are the people that are doing the pig butchering, because the criminal element has exploited them. Just like human trafficking, sexual trafficking, there's also, I don't know what the term is for these people, but they're being exploited as well.
Yeah, it makes sense. I guess that's.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get it on a down
Oh
note,
no, it's
but it's
yeah,
bad,
an-
like,
this is constant. It exists. It's important to talk about it.
yeah.
I think
Uh,
probably one of the important things to preface is that what we see in scams in crypto, with the exception of thefts from DeFi protocols, so those crimes that actually originate on the protocols themselves, most of these crimes that we're seeing, so romance scams have always existed. Ransomware predates crypto assets by a long time. There used to be ransomware where they were asking people to send wires and do bank transfers in order to decrypt their data. And so these aren't, generally speaking, crimes that are specific to virtual assets. Although I think in certain ways they're facilitated by virtual assets. You have these payments that are irreversible. You have these payments that are rapid. You have these payments that can happen across jurisdictions and without necessarily having an intermediary. And all of those things, if I'm a criminal, are a boon, except for the idea that you have this immutable public record that exists digitally, that any law enforcement agency in the world is able to access and use for the purpose of investigation and prosecution, which, if I were inclined to crime, would be a deterrent for me in terms of using these technologies for that purpose.
That's right. It's the a lot of them just go to the path of least resistance. And I recently listened to a story about Our Evil. They were the first ones to do ransomware as a service. So it even just got as far as they're not, they're just great coders. They can build the best software to execute on ransomware. So they just sold, gave out their software to everybody, and whoever used their software, they got a commission. But they ended up, that whole process scales. Like, it's just on the organized crime side of things, like, they're just getting really good at this too.
The criminal element is using every method possible, right? Like they even have hacked accounts where you can send money into, and I don't want to say which ones, but you could think about PayPal, Beam, anything. Those accounts are hacked, and even bank accounts, the Bank Montreal World, they have intermediate accounts that have been set up purposefully to funnel the money through to obfuscate the trail, right? So it's crypto's just one example. Cash is another. Wire transfer is another. Bank accounts being used, wallets being used. It's en masse. Not a. It's now a machine. It's no longer send out the code. What you said that there are evil. They send out the code and blah blah. No, these are like enterprises now that are all organized and set up, and they know when they shut this one down, there's another one over here that they can start up, or they might have three of them going at a time. But it's not random anymore. It's not small. It's very organized, and until we organize ourselves as a financial community, and that's one of the things that we try and do, and I'm hoping we can get restarted with Project Participate in the crypto space and maybe even expand it into banking and others. But the idea is we need to, as a community, start organizing ourselves better. And rather than citing ourselves, oh, we're just MSBs, oh, we're just banks, oh, we're just wallet providers, oh, we're just merchants. No, we're all in this together because the criminals are using us all and they bounce things through us.
That's right.
So until we start working together and stop thinking that it's a competition thing, because it's not. Competition is when there's legit business. The criminal element is going to keep exploiting all of us.
Yeah, that sounds inspirational. Like it makes me feel better that like what we're doing with Breadcrumbs and making our tools accessible to help prevent a lot of this stuff, is making a real big impact for helping prevent a lot of this illicit activity. I'd love to hear from Wayne as well. Like, if you guys are, as a payments processor, what are some of the things that you guys look out for as well?
Yeah, for sure. So as a processor, we are pillared on a couple of different principles, being regulation first, having the proper KYC, KYB, but also the fraud prevention and transaction monitoring. And some of the things that we look out for depends on the nature of the transaction. So we typically have microtransactions that go through the payment rail, but we also have larger transactions where there's certain dollar amounts that are more important from a regulatory perspective, 3K, 10K, 100K. And in the inbound transactions use case, we're always looking for, are the senders of the funds, is it coming from a high risk source? There's all these different organizations that we've talked about on this podcast, like things that are involved in drug trade or darknet or ransomware or OFAC, human trafficking that Joseph had mentioned. But then there's also things like, what about hacks and mixers and things that are a bit more on the higher risk scale. So we do look out for those things when we're taking payments, and we tag each payment with a risk score. And so all of that, with the help of Breadcrumbs, has been very helpful for us to identify the risk with each transaction. And even for use cases that are on the outbound side. So sometimes we'll have to process refunds for transactions, and we'll have to verify, hey, is the sender of the funds for the invoice, if they want to get refunded, is it the same address or is it a different address? And if it is a different address, is that different address something that's on the higher risk side? So these are all things that we take a look for in facilitating payments, amongst many other parts of the business that are important.
Right. Yeah, it's quite a lot, especially as a startup, and you also have a business to run. Yeah. Yeah. So have you seen that a lot, Amber? Like how do the smaller companies, how do they balance that? How do they balance the additional burden of well, I won't say a burden, but the added responsibility of also having to run these compliance programs, but also with their business and juggle that.
Fair, and there is burden, but I think you said it correctly when you talked about your responsibility. It's about managing your risk. It's about understanding what your attack surface is and being able to put in measures that are appropriate for that. Agnostic of anything else, you want to make sure that that risk is well managed, even if you're a smaller organization. And so that comes down to looking at the tools that are available for you. You might have staff that wear several different hats. So you might have someone that's working in compliance and they're working in operations and they're working in accounting,
Right.
but they need to be competent in all of those roles. And that's important. And I think such a big part of that is as you grow as a startup organization, understanding when you're bringing specialists into those roles, understanding the limitations of your software and what you can and can't do, And most importantly, really understanding what your risk is, understanding that attack surface and making sure that you're mitigating for what's actually in your business model. And that's something that the regulators expect you to be able to articulate and describe as well. And just to give an example of that, if I'm doing transactions in the virtual currency space and I'm doing electronic fund transfers and Bitcoin, I don't need a bunch of controls that relate to cash because I'm not doing cash transactions. I don't need a bunch of controls that relate to NFTs because I'm only dealing in Bitcoin. But I need to understand what the attack surface is related to those things that I am doing and to have the appropriate controls in place for that. So I want to be able to look at the Bitcoin blockchain. I want to be able to match my user's name with the name that's on their bank account or the name that the electronic funds transfer is coming from. And all of those are things that are going to reduce my attack surface and my risk from an anti-money laundering perspective, from a fraud perspective, from a business perspective. And so many of those things go hand in hand.
Right. Yeah, that's really important. It's really not just enough to have the tools there. It's also the understanding of the what to look out for and how to apply the tools.
How to use them. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, you need the more tools you have, but you gotta learn how to use those tools, right? Like, you'd be surprised at how many people put tools in. And when you go and challenge them, like, okay, how are you using the tool? We only worry about the ones that come up with an alert. I'm like, but that's only things that have been identified. So in compliance, you have to do the prevent, detect, deter, right? And just like recycling, you have to do reduce, reuse, recycle. And most people do it backwards. They recycle first, then they try and reduce, and they forget about reuse. But reuse is number one. And the same thing with compliance. It's always like people are thinking about the deterrent when, the detect, deter, forget. Anyway, it's backwards. I got it all mixed up in my head now.
The 3Ds.
Yeah. So they put it backwards, and I'm like, you're always trying to figure out why are you doing it backwards. You should be first deterring it, and then preventing it, and then detecting it, right? I think that's what it is. Anyway,
I think Amber put it in here. Prevent, detect, deter.
And most people do the deter first. And it's like, no, you got to do the prevent first.
Right. Prevent,
right?
yeah. It's like prevent yourself from getting a cold, as opposed to reacting to have you. Yeah.
Right.
And maybe just to add to that too, on the prevent detection side, we get a lot of inquiries. Like when we talk to businesses, charities, they ask me, hey, how do we stay out of the risk of touching dirty money? And so if we want to accept a donation, how do we know where the money's coming from and whether that's going to alarm any red flags? Or if it's someone that's taking investment and it's in crypto, well, how do I know it's not coming from a sanctioned country or if it's coming from a nefarious source? So on that specific point on prevention, the tool that we use with Breadcrumbs has helped us identify the source of these funds and be able to reject the payment processing for any of these dirty funds. And that's been very helpful in the 3 steps that Joseph has elegantly outlined. So we get a lot of those inquiries, not only for business, but also for charities and for fund management.
Which tool specifically do you use for that? Is it the investigation tool?
Well, we have the investigation tool, but we also have the enterprise compliance tool that helps us automatically identify the incoming transaction, the address, and tag the risk score. So depending on that risk score, if it's severe to low, we're able to tag every transaction with those scores and then identify how to react appropriately and essentially auto reject the ones that are too severe.
Does it kind of look like this? we might have yeah, this is a perfect segue into how some of you guys use the breadcrumbs tools. So this here is the transaction monitoring, eh? This is just a demo one that we use. But it's something like this, right? Where you you just have a list of transactions, and next to each transaction is generally a risk score that shows up, whether it's low, high, and sending alerts. That's the one you're talking about, right? Right.
Yeah, and then the beauty of it is also we have the APIs, right? So we're able to plug that directly into our system. Super fluid and elegant integration, in addition to the UI that's here.
Interesting. So do you with the API, do you guys what do you check? Do you do you get alerts from your API, or did you also set up a risk model from the breadcrumbs APIs?
Yeah, so both. So the the breadcrumbs API has the risk score typology, right, from the severest, then high, medium, and then low scores, which maybe you can show on the screen here. And
looks like this.
Yeah, exactly. And then depending on the entity type that you have, the risk score is tagged to that, and essentially enables anybody to really check the risk of any transaction. And the beauty of it is that as we kind of expand our crypto payments and the number of chains that we support, it's been great having multiple chains supported on breadcrumbs as well. So that's been helpful to align on different chains, different cryptos.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that with everyone. I mean, this it's much easier, and can hear it from a customer than from the vendor itself. So thanks for sharing that, Wayne.
Yeah, anytime.
I mean, while we're on the topic now as well, I'd love to hear how Joseph, how you guys use it, and I think we also have an example here.
Yeah, sure. So unfortunately, we have another product we do for the monitoring. I'm not going to explain that, but we're definitely going to look at the monitoring side. But we use this tool mostly for an investigation purposes. So we find that the open source intelligence, when we're going through and investigating, especially ERC-20 tokens and NFTs and things like that, is the ability to go through it and get the intelligence. In this case here, this is an NFT, fake NFT scam that they were selling NFTs. And if you go through, and it was nice to be able to go through and click on it and see what all the NFTs and give us an understanding of whether it was actually a fake or an airdrop. In this case, it was faking. They were faking the NFTs and selling them, and then exiting with the with the funds. So that's the way we use the product over at BitBuy. And it's more of these types of investigations, is to get inside and get the details. With our other tool, we have to sort of take that and then go to Etherscan and then go to the mempool and go here and go there. The nice part about this tool is it incorporates those tool sets. So you don't have to go and I don't know how many people use Etherscan, but it's such a pain in the behind, because every time you click on it, it's like, oh, you got to prove that you're a human. And I'm like, wow, robots testing if I'm human. It's just unbelievable. And I hate it. And you click on something, and then 30 seconds later, a minute, they think that you're somebody else, and they're asking, are you still a human or are you a robot again? It's like, oh, God.
So in the end, one simple feature, one powerful feature where we embedded all the NFTs within the product. How much time would you guess it would have saved, per investigation, just by incorporating the NFTs in here?
I don't know, but a lot, I would say, because when we find an address, it's not just on OpenSea, it's on Looks Rare, it's on this, it's on that. And it's like, holy cow. And a lot of times the sites that were supposed to be NFT marketplaces sometimes have disappeared too, right? So it's nice to be able to have the history in there too, saying, oh, now we see what happened, and then we can go and put more information in our STRs and stuff like that. But there's definitely a lot of OSINT in here that normally you either lose because time, or it's just a lot of different sites to go and find them all. So we appreciate this tool a lot, and it saves us a lot of time when it comes to these types of investigations.
Great. Well, that's wonderful to hear. And I'm sure it's stuff like this that our engineers love hearing, because they spend so much time like working hard every day to put this all together. But to hear like how it positively impacts your compliance team, really important.
The thing that I'm starting to realize with a lot of tools, and I'm looking for it more and more, is how much is embedded, so I don't have to go somewhere else, right? And I'm finding that the tools that keep me on the site, even though it's like a Facebook and a Twitter and all that, trying to keep you on the site, or an Instagram, the idea is actually pretty sound, because I don't have to waste time going everywhere else. Right. And so the more you can keep me in the tool, and that's what I like about this part, I don't have to go elsewhere to find stuff. Right. And then the more comfortable I feel about it, I don't have to know that, hey, oh, that looks rare. I don't have to go to Looks Rare now. It's all here.
Mm-hmm. And it's not even just your time. It's the you don't have to learn like a whole new other site how to use another service, right? You don't have to learn how to read smart contracts. You don't have to. Yeah. So
I just feel that it's a lot better when you don't have to jump around.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. I don't know, maybe Amber, from your side, I'd love to hear as well, like how you guys, if you guys use the tools, or how you might use it internally.
We do. And I think there are two bits for us that are fairly important. One of them is in terms of the Bitcoin payments that we receive. And from that perspective, we always want to know what the risk is associated with those addresses. Of course, we're doing all of the same off-chain stuff that we've always done in terms of screening clients and making sure that we understand who we're doing business with and what these organizations are. But it's also nice just to see the provenance of the payments that are coming in when we're being paid in Bitcoin. The other piece that we'll use this for is also in the context of audits. So we'll take an address, we'll look it up, we'll do a deeper dive into some transactions that we're seeing, particularly if we're seeing a case where there might be indicators that there is some sort of activity that could be potentially suspicious or potentially problematic. And so really understanding those transactions in either one of those forums is really important for us.
Right. Okay. So yeah, that's really helpful. As you were talking there, I just threw in some Al-Qaeda addresses, just so you could see like how important it is, and how much data we actually have in the system to give you those important decisions, to help guide you with those decisions. Yeah, that would just be an example. Like, I guess when you're talking about seeing some examples and what they're doing with it, if that address is just one hop away from something illicit, then it kind of raises those red flags. So yeah, that makes sense. Great. So yeah, I think the only other we are maybe going to share an example of, we now do this thing at Breadcrumbs called Wallet Wednesdays. So of course, every Wednesday, we just share a wallet and, tell a bit of a story about it. A few weeks ago, we did one on, what was it called? Monkey Drainer. Are you guys familiar with it? Yeah, you probably came across it back in a few months ago. So, the whole idea with Monkey Drainer, like you were saying, with all the different scams and hacks, this is an example of a scam that would occur. this page here, it looks like a legit page. I would come here and interact. My whole goal is to mint some new NFTs. But what's actually behind this page is it would give illicit instructions to my MetaMask to essentially drain my MetaMask of all like my NFTs, all my tokens, everything. So that's an example of like this does not look like a scammer page, right? So it's just that's how sophisticated, that's how good they're getting. Like there's even a video on this. It looks like a normal NFT project. So yeah, that's just kind of an example there. And within Breadcrumbs, we also show like how we've tagged them and everything. Seeing those funds go to the monkey drainer. Great. So we're actually coming up close to end of time here. So what I'd like to do is we're gonna play a game. So this is the nice surprise. So what I'd love is we play this game called Tribond. Have you guys ever heard of this game called Tribond before? No? All right. So the game is we give you three things. We name three things. Okay. So like I'll try it with you guys now. Like this is an example question. We're not going to actually do like a real one for the book or anything. So what do these three things have in common? Joe Biden, Bill Clinton, Richard Nixon. Any guesses, guys?
Old white guys?
All Caucasian white presidents or ex-presidents.
Okay, yeah, I think that's good enough. But yeah, you're right. So yeah, they're all presidents, U.S. presidents. So that would be the correct answer. So we're gonna do one now. I guess for some of the people watching. Okay, so you guys ready for it? And of course, it's going to be crypto compliance themed. So you got, yeah, okay. Let's take a look at this. So the question for today is, what do FinTrack, FinCEN, and FCA have in common? So
assuming the audience is the one that answers, or are we supposed to answer?
Well, it should be the audience for the book,
Okay.
but
I already have one, so I don't need it.
Okay. But if nobody gets it right away, you can just throw it in the chat box here. The Tribond chat box. Okay, so yeah, I think you guys might be able to get it. But if nobody answers in the next like 20-30 seconds, we'll just then I guess nobody wants the book. But but yeah, we generally play this game with each episode as a way to get some community engagements and share with the community. Cool. So yeah, maybe it's a little harder one this time around. But why don't we hear from you guys? What do you think the correct answer is?
These would all be regulators.
They are regulators. That's right. So yeah, that's pretty much the end of the show. But before we wrap it up, I actually have an announcement to make. Now, one of the things that you were talking about earlier was around the knowing how to use the tools. So one announcement we have to make is coming up very soon. Breadcrumbs will be having our own compliance handbook. That's right. Now, these kind of handbooks, usually you have to be like, a paid user paying like $50,000 or something. But we're going to be open sourcing this, making it accessible for everyone in the community to learn how to use not just the tools, but just in general, like, what is AML? What are like all the kind of terms that you guys brought up here today? All the acronyms, how do you effectively manage your compliance program? So it's one of the big announcements for today. I'm glad I could share with you guys in the audience. And yeah, I mean, we got a minute left or so. Just love to hear from you guys. Some last minute thoughts as we throw it out.
For me, go ahead.
I would just say that if you're feeling like investigations are complex and hard to understand, play with this tool. One of my favorite, I love that you're doing a compliance handbook, and thank you for that. I think that's incredible, Lauren. But also just that anyone can go and start to investigate and start to understand how blockchain investigations work and how blockchains work. That's such a phenomenal power to have. There's nothing stopping you from doing that, whether you're an individual or you're part of an organization. Just to be able to go and see that and to get that hands-on experience. It's absolutely an incredible experience. And so play with it. Don't be afraid. Don't be intimidated by it. Do it.
So you don't have to ask permission. You just go. Love to hear from Wayne next.
Yeah, the other thing is Lauren and the team are just impeccable in terms of their support and being insightful, connected, and responsive to any questions that the community has. Ever since the inception, the product has come a long way, and they really value the feedback from the community in terms of what people want to see, what kind of tools and adjustments are important to you. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out to the team and Lauren. They're one of the best.
Thanks. And
Joe,
let's hear.
I'm going to echo both what Amber and Wayne said. I mean, at the end of the day, we wouldn't be using the product if it wasn't something that we could use. It is a tool, and like I said, you need to have as many tools as you can in order to prevent, detect, and deter money laundering and terrorist financing and criminal activity and fraud and all the other stuff. So, and lastly, a shameless plug for the Crypto Defenders Alliance. If you're not part of it, please reach out to any one of us. I'm not sure if Wayne, you're in there yet. I can't remember. I know, Amber, you refer people over there, but we have a Telegram group that has over 400 different exchanges now around the world, and we communicate and share information. And Breadcrumbs is also one of the contributors and users of this. And so participate. If you're going to complain and you're not doing anything and you're not using any tools, then you shouldn't complain. Okay, so get out and get involved, use the tools, and help yourself to help others.
Awesome. I love that. The 3 Ps: participate. The keys to crypto compliance in Canada. Well, and around the world. So thanks, guys. Love it having you on our show. And it's the holidays coming up. So hope you have a wonderful holiday, whichever you're celebrating. And all the best.
Thanks for having me.
Guys see you guys till the next show.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
Okay.